Welcome to Built to Finish. I'm your host, Stephen Pivnik. Join me each week as we explore the journeys of audacious goal setters. This includes experienced founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs sharing pivotal moments that propel their success. We'll also be talking with endurance athletes who push the limits of physical and mental ability. This show is brought to you by Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services to help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Let's get started. Today's guest is someone who has a wealth of experience in both the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. He is an entrepreneur and advisor with over 25 years of experience in helping growth companies achieve breakthrough performance. He is a 3-time CEO and a 9-time company founder and has seen both spectacular businesses and notable failures along the way. His companies have been recognized by Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur magazine, and Software magazine for their fast growth on multiple occasions. In 2014, he sold his technology company to Publicis Group, an achievement that was awarded Strategic Acquisition of the Year by the Mergers and Acquisitions Association. He is currently a partner with Red Strategy Group. Mark Kennedy, welcome to the show.
Stephen, it's so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So, first question, we'll start with the end. When it was time to sell your last company, which was called Crown Partners, I think one of your last companies, I believe it specialized in razorfish technology, if I remember correctly.
It was a technology that was originally produced by SAP. It was called Hybris. Yep, it was an e-commerce platform.
Got it. And then it evolved into razorfish, right?
It was acquired by Razorfish. Yeah. So the business was acquired in 2014 by the Publicis Group, and the idea at the time was there was a lot of transformation going on in the kind of global ad networks, and they were trying to get deeper into the transaction stack. So they were really good at the design side, the campaigns, creative, persona development, and even into the data side of commerce. And they wanted to provide a complete kind of end-to-end solution, and they needed much deeper technical expertise. And we had developed a kind of a global operating model around how to quickly stand up large-scale e-commerce platforms. And they bought into that as part of having a kind of an end-to-end holistic offering for their customers.
Got it. So when it was time to sell, what were some of the most important strategies that helped you maximize the outcome for yourself and the other stakeholders?
Really, it kind of came down to a couple things. When you start a business, this was a bootstrap business that I started with 2 other gentlemen, a guy named Richard Hearn and a guy named David Bennett. And we started the business on the back end of the .com crash in really the summer of 2000. And we were working for a company that was going and then went full on bankrupt. And, we saw the value in the tech and what the internet was doing. And, we came together as a business, and the 3 of us, as we kind of came together, we started the business in the Delta Crown Room. It used to be, it's a good thing we didn't start it today. We'd be these Sky Club partners.
So Crown Partners came from Delta Crown?
It came from the Delta Crown Room in the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky airport. Yeah.
That's hysterical.
But the thing that's funny about it that answers your question is we got really good at identifying high quality, small software companies and partnering with them before they were partnered with or acquired by big companies. And it was just one of those things where we'd go out and we'd go to a trade show or we'd go to a sales call and we bump into one of these little founders or whatever. And, they weren't getting any attention from big customers or big partners. And we just talk to them and understand their technology and what they were trying to do and how they tried to fit into an ecosystem. And, at the time, SaaS wasn't a thing yet. These were still big installation-based softwares that were on-prem, all that big, ugly stuff that you know a lot about.
The good old days of installing your software by installing a CD?
I knew the world had changed when I first saw VMware. And, we used to do these installations, exactly these big enterprise software packages. And we have to start with, you're starting with the OS, and then you're building on top of that, your application server and all that configuration and the underlying database infrastructure and the web server. One of our projects, it might cost $50,000 or $100,000 just to install the software. And the day I saw VMware, when a guy went like this, he went copy and paste and created a complete identical instance of an enterprise package in less than 5 seconds. I just saw like $50,000 of budget of mine just fly out the window on every engagement. I'm like, this is going to be a tough business to make a living in.
Talk about the need for a pivot, but
Oh, absolutely. So, but the point of it was we got really good at identifying these little companies that were really good. And what ultimately led to our valuation was two things. One was we did meet this guy named Keith McFarland in 2008 or in 2009 when our business was cratering. Like we were in these businesses that were like content management that was like some workflow systems and imaging systems and pre-web
Mhm.
stuff. And we weren't really strategic to anybody. So all of our customers stopped spending money in 2009 and we almost went under. So we met this
Wow.
guy, Keith, and he was the breakthrough company author, my current business partner now. But at the time I brought him in as an advisor and he helped us pivot really quickly to basically answer the question, which of your customers are going to look at you as a supplier or partner as being absolutely essential? And what's that going to be? And that's when we picked revenue and e-commerce. And once we'd made that decision, we'd found a small company at a trade show in Germany. The company whose name was Hybris. The guy, Karsten Thoma, is the entrepreneur. He's since gone on to be the founder of Celonis, and he's a brilliant mind as a technologist. But we found his company when they were just a fledgling thing. They were a shopping cart, they were a product catalog, and they were a customer service module, all tied in a single package. And at the time, that was novel and unique. Nobody else had that. So we got to know them and started doing some of their projects and basically helped them build a sales channel in North America, where we were mostly. And as they started to ramp up and scale, we at one point had more Hybris certified resources than Hybris. And literally the day they got acquired by SAP, we had a complete line of, we had 3 suitors banging on our door that day because all the North American folks now and all the service folks now that have the SAP stack now needed to get e-commerce integrated into their infrastructure. So it was a question of we either needed $50 million to try to scale our services business as fast as we could, or we needed to find the best partner to sell it to. And that was, so the concentration, the decision to be strategic about something that was critical for our customers was the first thing I would say that led to our valuation. And then the second one was we picked the right horse with Hybris being acquired by SAP. And it was wild, but that was it. We just picked something that got super hot. And as soon as SAP bought them, we were in the market almost instantly.
Yeah, that's a great story and fantastic advice for anybody trying to figure out, what key strategies to implement to maximize valuation. So along the journey, talk to me a little bit about the evolution of your executive leadership team. Were the people that were there from the get-go still there when you exited? And how many different rounds and folks did you go through?
I'm going to cry for just a second, if that's okay. So, we started this business with 3 people and, you start these things with people that you care about and that you trust and you work through and you don't know when you start, you have these crazy ideas and these aspirations, what you want a company to be. And you don't really know though, until you've walked the walk, until you've faced down a banker on a Thursday that tells you need to put $1 million in to pay down your line of credit by Monday, or they're going to call the entire $8 million or $7.5 million note. Like those
Yeah.
are the defining moments of entrepreneurs.
Now I'm gonna cry because I remember those days too.
Yeah, exactly. I don't mean to get you into the PTSD, but that's the truth. So, you know, the executives along the way, we had these guys that were absolutely unbelievable. So early on, our what we thought would drive our business early on, we experimented with a lot of partnerships. We knew a model. We knew that there was a model that worked well, where back in this would be back in the 90s and early 2000s, the big software companies, the Oracles, the Microsofts, the SAPs, those folks, they all had these partner networks of implementation partners because the stock market, and to a degree, nothing has really changed. The stock market doesn't want software companies to jack up their revenues with professional services dollars because those are those are high fixed cost business subject to frequent and extended periods of overcapacity. So services businesses, if you want to build them, there's a lot of them out there. They're just fraught with the challenges of people and expenses and overcapacity. So we knew that model worked, and we weren't creative enough to really come up with something that was, a better business model at the time. Like a retainer would have been better. You've been through this before. You did the exact same thing. So we started out with a couple of different types of partnerships. So we started out with a partnership with a company called Documentum. And that used to be an independent software company before it was acquired by EMC. And when we did that, we had a handful of guys, one of which was my boss from the previous business that got blown up. That business was called Digital Lighthouse. And this guy's name was Rick McCartney. And he was a fantastic, huge Penn State fan, huge Philadelphia Eagle fan, and just a great human being, a proper good Irishman. And, he was one of the guys that came in, we brought in to, be partners in the business and kind of help us lead it. His, lifelong friend and partner and friend of mine as well, named John Garvin, came in. So we had this group of people that were there. And then we had this other group of people. We had a partnership with a little software company called Stellent that was eventually going to be acquired by Oracle to become part of a web content management platform. And there was a great guy in there named Brent Seaman, who was a wonderful human being and is a terrific person to work with. And, we had the original founders, and we started building up the business and scaling the business. And we thought we needed more of these partnerships. We'd bring in these subject matter experts, and we did some acquisitions. We acquired a little software company in New York. And what was happening was we thought that was the path, that we'd have like a whole bunch of these little $5, $6, $7 million businesses and scale up to 100 million and do all these great things. Well, the problem was we created all this complexity and all this dilution of our value without really having a core understanding of really the field that we were going to play in, and then how we were going to win in those areas. And what ultimately happened was the people that were great when we were super small because they would do everything, they were really focused on those technical competencies and skills, and probably less suited for building a larger organization. What we realized over time is we needed to do a couple of things. One is we needed people that were specific, who had more specific skills that were organizationally leverageable, like a specific greatness in sales, a specific greatness in software architecture, a specific greatness in project management and delivery, a specific, in recruiting and onboarding and upskilling people. All those things were really important, where the jack of all
versus the jack of all trades.
Yeah, it really hurt us. And then the hard part about that, and then of course we had to get more specific around the things that we're doing to win, because we're so broadly. So once we kind of ramped up, we made this giant mess of the thing. And then one of the original founders, we kind of got into some conflict with, so we had to buy Dave out. And that was, a negative and difficult event for us. It was probably more negative in hindsight than it needed to be, but it was one of those important, kind of an existential threats to the business. And then as we got more specific, we had to part ways with some people that we quite frankly really loved, and it hurt. And so we went through, I think, probably 3 evolutions of our leadership team until we got to the one that had, a specific chief technical officer, a specific chief delivery officer, a specific chief people officer. These were the skills that would enable the type of business that we built. And as we, the final model of our business was a global business. We had maybe 175 people in North America that were doing software. We basically built a business that could deliver in half the time and a third the price of what you could get from Deloitte or what you could get from Accenture, because we 2 full build cycles a day. We do we found that we liked China as an offshore partner better than India, because at the times I think it was probably the better plumbing over there, and it was actually easier to get to and deal with. 12 hours off of New York's time, so you could basically flip the day. So we from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. in New York, and then when we were going offline here, the build team would be going online in China at 7 a.m. They'd do the build from 7 to 8. They would develop the entire day there. So we would 2 full cycles in a 24-hour period. And that was the final model, but that's a different model than 3 guys who were living and working in Dayton, Ohio, who were just trying to, bill enough to cover the rent. So yeah, it was probably 3 full revisions of what the leadership team was before it actually got into the right spot. And when we did turn into Razorfish, that leadership team largely stayed intact. The acquiring company was called Razorfish. We were the Razorfish Technology Platforms Group, and we were the ones that would get called in to do all their e-commerce integration.
No, I think this is great for, founders to hear because every founder, myself included, and like you just mentioned, we hem and haw over some of these, tough decisions endlessly sometimes, and they take forever to make. But when the decision is finally made, A, it's the right thing for the individual because they move on to a role that they're better suited for. And then the right individual, finds their way into our organizations to get us to the next level that we're looking for. So it's super, super tough and it's never easy, but at the end of the day, it ends up being a win-win if you can put the emotions aside.
I agree with that. I mean, I've always had this, I don't know. I take a very, I think a holistic and hopefully a very personal view to, and I don't know how you feel about this too. This would be good to hear what you think is like, I'm always honored when I'm able to recruit someone that I see as being incredibly skilled and capable who wants to hitch their wagon to my cart or my horse for lack of a better term. Like to be able to recruit a very highly skilled executive to come into your business. Like I don't take that lightly. And the
Sure.
time that they invest in our business and the time they invest and their expertise that they put into it, I have a strong personal sense of believing that my job is to steward their success while they're there. And that's what, those are the balancing acts that make it really hard because sometimes you just get bad fits or sometimes
Sure.
circumstances change, companies change, people's lives change. And, those are hard but necessary conversation. Um,
Totally. And yeah, I was incredibly honored, very similarly to you, when we were interviewing for executive positions and we were interviewing folks that were in receipt of multiple offers, right?
yeah,
Because they were so good. And when they chose my company instead of the other opportunities they had, that was a really, really warm moment saying, wow, we really do have something here. If a person of XYZ caliber is willing to hitch their wagon to my company, you know, thank you.
seriously, it's kind of amazing.
So back to the sales process for a second. So you said you were once the Razorfish was acquired by SAP, you were immediately faced with several suitors. Were those the suitors that ended up bidding for your business, or did you hold off, continue to grow, and go through a structured sales process later?
A little bit of both. We had gotten wind that the acquisition of Hybris was likely to happen. And we had retained an investment banker and bank, a guy named Thomas O'Shea. I think he's currently a principal. It's called Bentley Partners. He was great. And he was wired into the Hybris SAP infrastructure. So he actually, I think, had done a deal for Hybris. I think they did like a merger with a pre, I forget what it was now, one of the pre e-commerce platforms. They brought two of them together
Hmm.
that gave them some scale. And he had been involved in that. And actually, they also had I think they had a private equity investment from Huntsman Gay, HGGC, Huntsman Gay Growth Capital or something like that. And that's uh, Steve Young's firm out of Menlo Park, California, the quarterback.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we got to know, we did this. We kind of we got basically put together the book, got the kind of company, lined up for this sort of thing. And then when the actual acquisition happened, when SAP was acquired or Hybris was acquired by SAP, that was when it went like instantly. Like there was a guy, I'm trying to remember what his name was. He was with WPP and his name was Hank. I forget his last name. He was the president or chief operating officer for WPP's North American business. And he calls up and, I was like, I think I was in either Atlanta or Chicago or somewhere. I was in Atlanta. So I get the phone call. I didn't recognize the number. Hello, Kennedy, this is Hank such and such from WP. I'm like, he's like, I need you to pick me up. Look, didn't even ask. You're picking me up tomorrow at 2:45 at the Dayton airport. I'm flying in there to buy your ass.
Oh my
I'm
God.
like, what? I'm like, what? I'm like, I can't be there. I got client meetings. I'm in Atlanta. He said, you're going to get your ass back there and you're going to get bought. You're about to be a rich motherfucker and you're going to take the money and shut your mouth. And I'm like,
You and you don't even know who this guy
I had
is.
no idea who he was.
Wow, the hubris on this guy, amazing.
So I'm like, sorry, Nick, I'm not going to be there, but somebody will be. And so sure as heck, he came and visited and it was, it was the big three. It was Omnicom, WPP, and Publicis, I think were the three. And, at that point, we had a couple of private equities, including Huntsman Gay. They backed out. They're like, the premium's going to be too high with a bidding war. We're not going to get into that with you guys. But they're like, you guys are going to get bought by a strategic, so hang in there. And actually, they were terrific through that whole process.
So you were fortunate enough to actually get the bidding war going for your company.
We did, yeah. We were lucky, and like I said, it was just a function of. It's funny is all those meetings we had over those years where we were learning about those software companies. That actually wound up being the thing that did it for us.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't say fortunate. I mean, obviously, the best outcome for an investment banker is to get a bidding war going for their client. And that happens more often than not if you have the right investment banking firm working for you.
For sure, without a doubt. Yeah.
And I'm assuming they were able to raise the initial offer to something significantly higher.
Like I said, it's been over 10 years. So this deal happened in the letter of intent. We received the letter of intent. I think it was in September 2013 was the original letter of intent. And then we actually, in the middle of the whole like due diligence process, Publicis decides to buy Sapient, which is, we were 500 people. Sapient was about 13,000 people and
Oh my
a
gosh.
similar thing. So we're in the middle of it. We're like, oh my God, this is going to fall apart. They're not going to do it. But they actually did. But yeah, I feel like if I remember right, it was probably about a factor of two. So the original offer probably got in, it was up between 50 and 100% premium over where it started.
That's amazing. So the investment banking firm definitely earned their fee several times over.
Yes, they did. They did a really good job. To say this too, that, Publicis Group is the one that bought it. They bought us. They put us into Razorfish, which is their North American business, or their North American like digital agency. They were an absolutely fantastic buyer. Everybody worries about earnouts and companies trying to do what they can to not pay you or somehow screw you in some capacity. Those guys paid every cent when they said they were going to do it right on time. I mean, they were a terrific buyer.
That is great to hear because a lot of founders that have exit experience would say that an earnout is a lawsuit waiting to happen.
I almost feel like this. If you have, and this sort of like, this is just my experience from most of my customer base throughout my 30-year technology career building these services businesses has always been Fortune 500. And I don't
Hmm.
think I've ever not gotten paid an invoice. So I think if you're
Right.
working with a quality buyer and they're a public market, company or a public company like the Publicis Group is, or any of the other ones are, I can see if you get into the mid market or down market, you might get into those kind of things or those kind of
Sure.
situations or misunderstandings. But I feel like their M&A team, while slow and very French, was very thorough. They were all very straightforward. There were no sleight of hand or anything that looked wasn't anything but straight up and up. So they were a great buyer. My business partner Richard, whom, I still love to death and talk to him all the time and still do some work with him. He was on the other side. He was like, they're going to screw us and we got to ourselves. And I'm like, Richard, I don't think that's how this is going to work. And it didn't. He was
Sure.
girded us for just in case. And
Besides Sapient having, no impact on you other than taking some attention away from your buyer for the process, were there any like big surprises that came out in due diligence that came completely out of left field?
oh, that is an excellent question. I mean, the Sapient one was such a you got to be kidding me moment that it kind of sucked all the rest of the air out of the due diligence process.
So that actually benefited you because they were distracted with Sapient.
I think it was. I mean, if you look at the price tags between the two businesses, I mean, we did really well, but I think there was probably another 3 or 4 zeros behind the Sapient deal. At least 2. Some of the things were like that were just kind of weird in the process. Like they wanted like long-term real estate leases and stuff from the buildings we had. You're like, that does, I mean, I never thought that would matter at all. And
Huh.
they cared about stuff like that. And, they were, I think yeah, nothing, so I can't say anything really like I wish I had a good story about due diligence, but you know,
Yeah.
I think there's been
It,
enough paved that we've paved over that road a few times since
you know what? That's great to hear because you're definitely in the minority. Most have, 2 or 3 examples of things that were completely brought out, from the blue. But so, hey, if there weren't any major surprises, fantastic.
Yeah, what I would say though is in terms of that being the case, or from a, causality perspective, we were always really, really careful about, like, we ran, like, our book, there were no, there, we never messed around with the books. We were really focused on treating the business like a business, not a personal checking account. Um, when we did do a significant amount of investment in resources and growth at the end. So when we went back, and basically most businesses that go to market do recast their financials and say, look, this is our operating model, and this is what, this is the actuals, but this is what the business would look like if we weren't doing some of this, the adjusted EBITDA. Sure. So we went back and did that. I think that was credible because we had done such a good job of running the business that way, and treating it like a business. I think a lot of the lack of surprises were the fact that we just weren't doing stupid stuff,
Sure.
cars and trips and stuff.
No, I think that's fantastic advice because a lot of founders do treat their businesses as a personal checking account. And in some cases, it's totally justified because at the end of the day, one of the many reasons you go into business for yourself is to do better for yourself and your family. And there's a lot of opportunities to write, cars and trips and stuff off. And that's which is totally fine, but there you need to like draw a line in the sand and stop doing some of that. So an extended amount of period goes by where an acquirer can see that this really is a true business, and you won't have to go through all of these, contortions to start modifying years and years and years worth of financial reports to take out all of those watches, those trips, those houses,
The ad backs, exactly.
all of those ad backs. So, were you part of the deal in terms of having to stay with the acquirer for a certain amount of time, or did you architect it in a way where you did not have to work for them?
I'm going to go with C, all of the above. So we were, I think I was officially an executive vice president of the Razorfish technology platforms business, and as was my business partner. And I think we started out, we had 3-year contracts. We had a 3-year earnout, and we had 3-year employment agreements, but we also had the ability to opt out. And the, what was funny about it was, so we got acquired, and the actual transaction closed either June 30th or July 1st of 2014. And I remember, like, it happened, and like it was sort of, it was like a non-event, like
Uh-huh.
other than like money moving around into accounts and stuff like that, which
Sure.
was great. Those are one of those days you're like, holy cow, look at that. Um, but what was crazy was, I worked for a guy in the United States named Shannon Denton. He was the president of Razorfish in North America. And I don't think he ever actually called me. So I stayed with them from July 1st, 2014. And I stopped working there the Tuesday before Thanksgiving in 2015. Because what happened was, I looked at the business, and most of our business was big, like backlog book software projects. Like, you book these giant system integration projects to
Mhm.
run. So we had booked enough that we could see the earnout was there. And then it was economically more beneficial for me to resign and get paid out in EBITDA multiple than it was for the salary that I was going to draw. And so literally that was it. And I give my resignation in a simple little 2-sentence thing. And that was strange. And then afterwards, I of course called Shannon, and I'm like, hey, how come you never called me? Like, I would think I had skills that, I was a little bit of hurt, right? I figured I had, skills that could build businesses and recruit and all these. And he goes, you made so much money. He goes, would you really have listened to me? And I'm like, might have.
Right.
He goes, don't worry about it. I'm like, all right.
So, how emotional was it for you as a founder to like put in so many years of blood, sweat, and tears, and then to sell it? Or was that something that you had in mind from the very beginning?
Yeah, we definitely had in mind that this was something that we wanted to build. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to make a dent in the universe. So I guess I'll answer that in a couple of different ways, because I think it's a very nuanced and complicated question. I've thought about it a lot. As a matter of fact, one of the guys that I knew and was buddies with, colleagues with, even competitors with along the way is a guy named, I think his name's Dirk. What's his last name? Dirk Bodie, I think is his name. And he's the founder, and he's one of the founders and principals. I think he's currently the CEO of a company called FME, like Frank, Mark, Ernie, FME, and they're in Germany. And they had almost exactly the same type of business that I had. It was a
Hmm.
services, system integration, technical services business. And he still has it. And I reached out to him, I don't know, about a month or so ago, and just to, try to connect with him to just see what the other path had looked like. Cause you do have that. Now, for me, one of the things I struggle with along the way. So when you get properly scared in business, and as an entrepreneur, you get scared quite a bit and you kind of work your way out of problems. But in 2009, we were that close to complete financial oblivion. And, I'd made a promise. I had made a promise to my wife at the time that I said, look, no matter what, she was a physician. And I said, no matter what, I said, I won't ever screw things up to the point where you will have a lifestyle worse than that of what you could have gotten on your own as a physician. Right. So I always called that the Hippocratic oath of business, which is first do no.
I love that.
And, I had gotten myself into a situation where I was that close to not being able to fulfill that commitment. And that scared me properly good. And then I got to go to a course, one of those executive education courses at Harvard, at the Harvard
Hmm.
Business School. And they taught how to lead these technical services firms. The course is called Leading Professional Services Firms, LPSF. And it's the greatest opening of any course I've ever been to in the world. The guy walks out. His name's Tom DeLong. He's a PhD and he's this super brainiac on services companies. And he walks out and he goes, by show of hands, I've got this idea for an investment opportunity for you folks. And, you guys look like a well-heeled group. I'm sure we can raise some money here today. So by show of hands, who here would like to invest in my business that has, here's the attributes. I'm only going to tell you a few things. It has high fixed costs subject to frequent and extended periods of overcapacity. Anybody want to invest in this? Anyone? Of course, no one raises their hand.
Of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid you're already invested in this because that's the nature of professional services firms.
And that's why you're in this class.
And that's why you're here, to make sure you don't have those extended periods of overcapacity. So that properly got my eyes open. Of course, getting scared stiff in 2009. And then the other part of it too, Steve, is I've always been very much a business junkie, but I wasn't a junkie on the type of thing my business did at the time. And I think if there's one maybe regret I have as an entrepreneur, and that is I feel like and as I've changed and evolved, I've definitely moved into this, which is like I had a incredible amount of pride in the model we built and the system that we built. Like the value proposition my business created was really good. And that was what I cared about. But I really didn't care about the underlying, I didn't really care about the e-commerce technology, right? I mean, it wasn't that important to me. It could have been Oracle's NetSuite tool, or it could have been any one of these other platforms. I cared about the relationships we had with the folks, but I guess I wasn't enough of a nuts and bolts person on the product side or the service side of my business. So, that's one of the areas where I look and go, and as I've gotten older, I've gotten much more, I guess you kind of have to fall in love with the thing that you're doing to be really great at it, to put the amount of energy into it that you need. And as I've gotten, I guess, more, older and more experienced, I've certainly moved in that direction. So, it's a complicated question. Cause I think back and I'm like, that was probably the right outcome for that business. We got that business we created this value creation engine that they didn't have. And we got it to a place that could ultimately leverage it across, a lot of hundreds of companies in North America and thousands globally.
Sounds like it was a very bumpy ride, as most entrepreneurial journeys are, but with a very positive outcome at the end. So congratulations on all of that.
Thanks. It was a lot of, it was a culmination of a lot of work. It was, a lifetime of work. And it's one of those things where I think you age in dog years while you're doing that. So it was a 14-year run to get through it, and it felt like a lot longer.
I hear you. Trust me. Been there, done that. So let's switch gears real quick. Red Strategy Group. What is Red, and what do you guys do for entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So Red Strategy Group is a strategic consultancy that is focused on the unique needs of growth companies. And Red is an acronym. It stands for Rapid, enterprise development. And what it is it is a form of, uh, it takes business strategy and applies agile software development techniques towards business strategy. And the idea
Mhm.
is, it solves a couple of problems that limit the performance for founder led and breakthrough and growth companies. So basically, think about it like this. Most businesses, when you think about strategy, they involve too few people in actually building out and understanding the strategy. Most companies in the fall, October, they'll take their senior leadership team, so a small group of people, they'll shoot them off to an offsite. They'll think about some of the strategic choices that you make in running a business. How do I leverage our strengths? How do we further differentiate? What are we going to do next year in revenue? What customers do we want? What do we want our economic model to look like? Do we want more revenue or growth, or do we want more profitability, or both? And they make some choices. And that's all well and good. And then what they'll do is they'll basically take those choices and then they'll translate those into budgets, and those budgets get translated into action plans for the individual departments. So sometime in January, you're going to take all that stuff, you roll it into a PowerPoint, you present it to the company, you probably come up with some pithy ideas and phrases about something that you're going to do different for that coming year. And you give that presentation to the people. And 2 days later, you're out solving customer problems and employees are up your backside, and you've forgotten everything that goes in those 30-page PowerPoints. So the first thing that Red Strategy does is it involves more people in the strategy process. So I'll get a room full of maybe between 25 and 75 people. And over the course of really 3 days, we'll define a strategy. But it's super important. What's super important about that strategy is it's a structured process that everybody in that room has a hand in creating it. So when you come out of that meeting, you have 75 people that are aligned behind how you're going to win, and they understand why you're going to do it. And that's super powerful. So it's one of those ways where you can you can tap into that unlocked potential in an organization by getting a whole bunch of different perspectives. And it's not just senior folks. And that's the other piece of it too. So the other thing we do is we think organizations talk about strategy too infrequently. Strategy is actually something we believe in, a very dynamic operational strategy that everybody in the organization understands. And what we do is we get those folks together 3 or 4 times a year, and we'll say, okay, so we'll basically spend those initial 3 days. We'll build the strategy. We'll come up with our assertions around value creation, and we're going to come up with some plans for sending people out in the marketplace and testing those assertions. Bring them back together 120 days later, and we ask them 3 important questions. What's the most important thing you did? What's the most important strategic success we had in the last 90 days or 120 days? Second thing,
Mhm.
where do we fall short of our strategic potential? And then the last one, which is the most important, is what did we learn about our strategy? And that's a hard one for a lot of organizations because it has to be unique to them. Strategic choices are unique to organizations. So we take that information and then we course correct maybe 5 or 10 degrees
Okay.
every quarter. And what ultimately happens is over the course period of time is the business starts to learn, and it starts to double down on the things that matter the most. So the levers that we use in the red process are strategy, people, and execution. We optimize all 3 of those things. You've had a chance to see what the TASE process looks like that we use to help really cut through the people side.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by it. I think many listeners would have probably taken a Myers-Briggs test in the past. So I find this to be like Myers-Briggs on steroids. That gives you a much deeper understanding of the individual, but I'm going to butcher explaining it, so I'll let you do it.
Yeah. So TAMS it's an acronym that stands for Test of Attentional and Interpersonal Style. And it's a personality instrument that's designed to really understand the unique differences in performance of human beings. Originally, it was created to understand the difference in performance between Olympic athletes, between when it mattered in like medal rounds or qualifying versus when it didn't matter in the like, friendly heats or training.
Mhm.
And it basically goes to try to figure out where does your attention go naturally and then under stress? And how do you behave naturally and under stress?
Right.
And the concept is when you're under stress, the more like you become. And the counterintuitive and the interesting thing about Taze, it was then, of course, is that most people don't get into trouble, especially successful people. Successful people don't get into trouble because of their weaknesses. They've figured out compensating mechanisms to overcome
Hmm.
their weaknesses. Most people and companies get into trouble because they overuse their strengths at inopportune times. So when you get under pressure, you're going to play to your strength harder than you
Right.
would normally. And what that does is that creates these big blind spots and create big problems for people and organizations. So we use this tool as a way to kind of really quickly strip through and understand where are these organizations likely to get themselves in trouble and how do we guide them away from those areas. A lot of organizations, some of the big common areas, organizations that are very analytic and high controlling. Those are people that are hopelessly complicators. They can't pick the very
Hmm.
few things that matter because the other stuff is so important. A lot of
Right.
organizations have a concentration of people that are high on their personality types with support and affection and low of criticism and anger. Those types of organizations always tolerate non-performers because they just can't weed them out because they can't deal with conflict. So these are the types of things that you can lean into so when it comes to executing a strategy, that's where the combination or the interplay of the actual strategy. So the collection of ideas about how you're going to win interplays with the people side, which is how do you make these people, how are they wired and how can you get them to operate at peak capability? And then the execution side is the last piece, which is always the most important, which is can they pick and execute the 20% of things that generate 80% of the results? Because when you do that, that's when you start to get leverage. And that's where operationally, you get these tremendous results. I think when you look at those three things and then you apply this principle that basically human beings always overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year, but they wildly underestimate what they can accomplish in 3 to 5 years.
Sure.
And, you can just achieve incredible results. Like if you look at a business from a normal evaluation, if you give me a 3-year runway, almost guarantee I'm going to 6 to 8x the value of the business.
That's an incredible promise, and you've seen it and you've delivered it.
Over and over. I mean, the outcomes that we generate on average, our customers generate an incremental 108% increase in earnings after 1 year. And then in the 3-year range, we're in the double and tripling the size of the business, which is quadrupling or plus the size of the actual earnings. So when you look at it in that capacity, and as you know, from being a founder, as you start to scale, and it's actually with what you're doing right now, as you start to scale EBITDA, you actually accelerate the multiplier of valuations for companies. Well, when you get yourself on look at like a SaaS business with their rule of 40. So if you can, if let's say you increase their net license or their revenue growth from 15% to 50%. And
Hmm.
you've also increased, and maybe they were EBITDA neutral, but now you go EBITDA from neutral to 25 or 30%, you basically doubled or tripled their multiple right there. And you put the
Easily.
number on top of it with the actual math of the revenue growth and the EBITDA, and you're easily in 6 to 8x. So it's just one of those things where, I think as funny as it is, most businesses are capable of a lot more than they think they are.
Agreed. Totally agreed. So to learn more, so the person that invented this methodology is named Keith McFarland. Is that correct?
Yeah, his name Keith McFarland, and he's a very interesting and unique dude. He's obviously a business partner of mine, a mentor of mine, somebody I love dearly. But his background is very eclectic. He originally is an academic. He was the youngest dean ever at the Pepperdine Business School. And he did a PhD in business at what's it called? Claremont College in California, where he studied under Peter F. Drucker. And I don't know if you know Peter F. Drucker or familiar with his works, but he did some important things like he coined the phrase knowledge worker. He basically developed the concepts of outsourcing. He developed the concepts around core competency for organizations and businesses. I mean, the guy is
Yep.
like one of those.
The list goes on and on.
He's
And
a generational mind. So on the first day for each new incoming class of PhD students at Claremont College in California, Professor Drucker would posit the following question. If you're going to make a list that is as short as possible, but as long as necessary of the reasons why some businesses win and other businesses lose, what would be on your list? And he would stop talking and he would start writing. And those were the days when they had those big chalkboards, the slate
Mhm.
boards that would move side to side and up and down.
Yep.
And he would start writing furiously. And all these, of course, these smart, PhD students in business. So you're obviously all about business. They're throwing out stuff they're talking about supply chains and they're talking about technologies and differentiation. And they're throwing all these, he's writing down furiously. And he would write for 70 of the 75 minutes as these kids just kept throwing out answer after answer after answer. And then finally, at the end of the class, some poor schlep would raise their hand and say, Professor Drucker, we've been doing this for 70 minutes and the class is almost over. You're going to give us the answer to the question. And he just turned around and he said, your PhD students in business, I expect you to dedicate the rest of your life to figuring it out. And then they'd sit back. But that question actually moved and changed Keith in a unique way. And it drove him to really look for truth in that. And after giving that presentation and asking that question to probably 2,000 different groups or audiences, the answer to the question can be answered in as simple as 3 words: strategy, people, execution. Everything falls under one of those 3 buckets or more than one of those buckets pretty neatly. So what we've done is we've created an entire operating system and a process that optimizes those 3 levers so that growth companies can do the best math, which is 1 + 1 + 1 can equal 5 or 7 or 9. And that's where you get operating leverage out of business. And that's where people really, achieve the kind of scale and performance that they're looking for.
That's fantastic. We can drop the mic on that easily in a second. But one last question. What is the target company size for a Red implementation? What's the minimum annual revenue?
Minimum, the smallest I've ever done it with is 5. Typically, the scale it's in the 10 to 50 range.
Okay, 10 to 50 million in annual revenue.
And they're on the top end, there really isn't any. I mean, we do it for market leaders that are upwards of 10 billion in revenue.
Understood. Great. So you are a wealth of knowledge. I'm sure people will want to contact you after hearing all of this. What is the best way to contact you?
Email is fantastic. Mark at redstrategygroup.com. It's Mark with a K. That's the easiest way to get hold of.
Okay, cool. Mark, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. This has been incredible advice and stories for entrepreneurs to really think upon as they continue to scale their companies.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to everybody listening to Built to Finish. If you've liked this show and think somebody out there would benefit from its content, please forward a show link to them. Please like and subscribe. And thank you very much again for listening to this episode of Built to Finish. That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stephenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Accresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.